The morning my sister arrived to take my garden away from me, she pulled up in a white Range Rover wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a leather folder like she already owned the place. My father stepped out behind her without looking at me. My mother crossed her arms and said, "You had your chance, Claire. Madison needs this property now." I remember the smell of lavender in the air that morning. Cool breeze, wet soil, bees moving lazily between the rows, the kind of peaceful silence people paid thousands of dollars to experience there. Then Madison looked past me, past the iron gates, past the fountain she thought was broken, and saw the black luxury SUVs lining the driveway, saw the white ceremony tent, saw the county officials, saw the cameras, saw the giant sign hanging over the entrance. Whitmore Healing Gardens now partnered with Aurelia Wellness Group. Her face lost all color. "What the hell is this?" she whispered. Then one of the reporters walked up to me, smiled, and asked Captain Whitmore, "How does it feel to finalize a $4.7 million acquisition this morning?" That was the moment my sister started screaming. But none of them knew the real story yet. None of them knew what it had cost me to build that place. And none of them understood that 3 years earlier my own mother had looked me in the eye and said, "The useless child only gets the useless things." The difference between my sister and me started long before the garden. It started with the kind of family where one child is treated like a future investment, and the other is treated like an obligation people quietly regret. My younger sister Madison was 31 now, blonde, beautiful, effortlessly social. She knew how to walk into a room and make people feel important. My father loved that about her, said she had executive energy. My mother called her radiant. I called her expensive. In May of 2021, Madison launched a lifestyle brand that mostly consisted of filtered Instagram photos and affiliate links for skincare products she didn't actually use. 2 months later, my father bought her a condo in Los Angeles. Not a starter condo, not something modest. A 2-bedroom luxury unit in Beverly Grove with marble countertops, rooftop pool access, private fitness center, valet parking, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Purchase price $1.2 million. I remember the exact number because my father repeated it 3 separate times during dinner like he wanted the whole restaurant to hear it. We were sitting at Ocean Prime in Beverly Hills, white tablecloths, crystal glasses, my father wearing his navy cashmere blazer, Madison smiling into her champagne like she'd just won an Oscar. "To new beginnings," my mother said, raising her glass. Madison laughed softly. "Dad, you really didn't have to do all this." But she said it the way people say things they absolutely expected. My father leaned back proudly. "You understand branding, sweetheart. You understand people. That's where the future is." Then he looked at me. "And how's the army treating you these days, Claire?" Just like that. From million-dollar gifts to small talk. I was 34 then. Captain Claire Whitmore, military intelligence, 2 deployments overseas, Bronze Star recipient, 6 years active duty. I had spent most of my adult life in desert heat concrete compounds, briefing rooms, and places where people measured trust in seconds instead of years. But sitting at that table wearing my pressed black dress uniform while my sister got handed a future on a silver platter, I felt invisible. "Things are good," I said. My mother nodded distractedly, still doing all that classified stuff. Madison smirked into her wineglass. "Claire probably can't tell us without killing us." Everyone laughed. Even my father. I smiled politely because that's what military training teaches you to do. You learn very quickly how to control your face when something hurts. Dinner ended around 9:30. My father paid the bill without looking at it. Madison hugged him in the parking lot, crying carefully enough not to ruin her makeup. I thought maybe that was it. Maybe there would be nothing for me at all. Honestly, I would have preferred that. 3 days later, my father called. "Come by the house," he said. "Your mother and I want to discuss your future. Not celebrate your service. Not congratulate you. Discuss your future." I drove down to Newport Beach the next morning. Their home sat behind a private gate overlooking the water. Everything about it smelled expensive. Lemon polish, fresh flowers, imported candles my mother bought in bulk from some boutique in Santa Barbara. Madison's new condo photos were already framed on the piano. I stood there staring at them while my father poured himself coffee. Finally, he slid a manila folder across the kitchen island. "We're giving you property," he said. I opened the folder. The first photo showed dead hedges surrounding a cracked stone pathway. The second showed an abandoned greenhouse with broken windows. The third showed dry land covered in weeds and overgrown brush. "Where is this?" I asked. "Outside Sacramento," my father replied. "About 40 acres. Used to be a botanical nursery back in the 80s. Used to be. The appraisal paperwork sat underneath. Land value $310,000. Structures listed as deteriorated. Restoration estimate extensive. Property taxes overdue. I flipped through the pages slowly. There was even water damage inside the caretaker's house. My mother stirred cream into her coffee without looking at me. It suits you better than Los Angeles. I looked up. What does that mean? She shrugged lightly. You've never been glamorous, Claire. My father leaned against the counter. Madison's business requires presentation, networking, visibility. Your situation is different. Situation. Like I was a problem being managed. I stared at the photographs again. Dead roses, rusted gates, dry fountains. This place is abandoned, I said quietly. It has potential, my father answered. My mother finally looked directly at me then, calm, cool, casual. The useless child only gets the useless things. Silence. No one reacted after she said it. Not even her. Like it was simply a fact everyone already understood. I remember hearing the refrigerator humming behind me, the ticking of the wall clock, a gull crying somewhere outside near the ocean. My chest felt hollow. Not angry yet. Just hollow. I could have argued. God knows I had enough reasons to. I could have reminded them that while Madison was taking selfies at rooftop brunches, I was sleeping beside a rifle in Afghanistan, wondering whether the next convoy briefing would get someone killed. But I didn't. Military training teaches you something else, too. You learn that begging people to value you never works. I closed the folder carefully. Okay, I said. My father looked surprised. You'll take it? Yes. My mother blinked once. That's probably for the best. For the best. As if they'd done me some tremendous kindness. I drove north 2 days later. 7 hours alone on Interstate 5 with an overnight bag military duffel and the deed papers sitting on the passenger seat beside me. The property sat 40 minutes outside Sacramento near a dying little town most people drove through without stopping. The gate barely opened. Weeds scratched the sides of my truck as I pulled into the driveway. The fountain out front was dry and cracked straight through the middle. Dead vines hung from the greenhouse frame like exposed veins. The wind carried the smell of dust and old wood. I got out slowly. The silence out there felt different than silence overseas. In Afghanistan, silence meant danger. Here it felt like abandonment. I walked through the property alone for almost 2 hours before entering the caretaker's house. 1 bedroom, broken heater, warped floors, rust stains in the sink, no air conditioning. The back porch overlooked what used to be gardens once. Now it looked like a graveyard for things people stopped believing in. That first night, I sat outside in an old folding chair eating cold grocery store chicken salad, while the California heat finally softened into evening. The sky turned purple over the dead fields. Crickets started singing somewhere in the brush. And for the first time in my life, I understood exactly what my family thought I was worth. The first morning on the property, I woke up at 4:47 a.m. because my body still ran on army time. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I heard the wind rattling through the broken greenhouse windows, smelled dust and old wood, and remembered. Sacramento outskirts, 40 acres of dead land, 1 collapsing caretaker's house, no family, no neighbors in sight. Just me. I sat up slowly on the narrow mattress I'd dragged in from storage and checked my phone out of habit. No messages, no missed calls, nothing from my parents, nothing from Madison. The silence didn't surprise me. I'd spent enough years in the military to understand an uncomfortable truth about people. Most only notice your absence when you stop being useful to them. Outside, dawn was beginning to spread across the property in thin streaks of gray-blue light. The fields looked endless from the porch. Neglected irrigation trenches cut through dry soil like scars. Dead rose bushes leaned sideways beneath layers of dust. I pulled on boots, tied my hair back, and started walking the property. By 600, I'd already built a perimeter map in my head. Military habits. Always assess terrain first. The western edge had better drainage. The northern section held shade longer than the rest. The greenhouse structure was damaged but salvageable. Water access would be the biggest issue. The old irrigation system had completely failed years ago. At 7:12 a.m., I found the main water control valve buried beneath weeds and cracked concrete. At 7:47, I managed to reopen one rusted section of pipe. At 8:03, muddy brown water sputtered out across the dead garden beds for the first time in years. I stood there watching it quietly. It wasn't much. But something about seeing water move through dead ground again made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Like the place had been waiting for someone not to give up on it. That became my routine. Wake at 500. Black coffee. Protein bar. Work until dark. Some days I cleared brush for 12 straight hours under brutal California heat. Other days I repaired fencing, hauled debris, patched leaking pipes, or rebuilt sections of the greenhouse frame one board at a time. I used deployment habits to survive financially. Minimal spending. Precise schedules. Inventory tracking. Operational planning. Every dollar got logged in a notebook beside my bed. I sold my watch. Canceled subscriptions. Stopped buying anything unnecessary. At night I ate canned soup or rice at the small kitchen table, while old military briefings played quietly in the background because silence felt too heavy otherwise. 3 weeks after moving in, the air conditioning failed completely. I couldn't afford repairs. So I slept with windows open while coyotes cried somewhere beyond the tree line. Funny thing about loneliness, after a while it stops feeling dramatic. It just becomes part of the furniture. By September I'd cleared almost 6 usable acres. That's when I met Eleanor Brooks. She pulled onto the property in an old green Ford pickup around noon while I was repairing drip irrigation lines beside the greenhouse. She stepped out slowly, probably late 60s, silver hair tied beneath a faded blue bandana. "You the Whitmore girl?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She looked around the property for a long moment. "Richard Whitmore's daughter?" "Yes." Not judgmental, just thoughtful. She pointed toward the greenhouse. "You know those foundation supports are sinking on the east side?" "I do." "You gonna fix them?" "When I can afford concrete." That made her smile slightly. Eleanor had taught horticulture at UC Davis for 30 years before retiring. Her husband Frank had been a Vietnam veteran who passed away from cancer almost a decade earlier. Man spent half his life pretending he was fine, she told me later. Military men are good at that. I almost laughed. So are military women. After that day she started showing up twice a week. Sometimes with gardening books. Sometimes with cuttings. Sometimes just with iced tea because the California heat got vicious by afternoon. She never pitied me, that's why I liked her. One evening in October she stood beside me watching the sunset over the dead western fields. "You move like a soldier even when you're exhausted," she said. I looked over at her. "What does that mean?" "It means you don't waste motion. Most people quit long before their bodies do. Soldiers don't." I stared out across the property again. "Sometimes I think my family expected me to disappear out here." Eleanor nodded once. "Then survive long enough to disappoint them." That line stayed with me. Winter came hard that year. The caretaker's house leaked during storms. Rainwater crept through the ceiling into buckets I lined across the floor at night. The old heater barely functioned. Some mornings I could see my breath inside the kitchen. Still, I kept working. Because something strange had started happening to the property. It was changing. Slowly at first. The soil responded after months of irrigation correction and compost rebuilding. Wild lavender along the northern edge began thriving once invasive weeds were removed. Native herbs started returning on their own. Life always wants to come back if you stop choking it. By spring, I'd transformed nearly 10 acres into structured healing gardens, using drought-resistant medicinal plants and lavender rows designed around therapeutic walking paths. That idea came from Afghanistan. During deployment, there were nights soldiers would sit silently beside makeshift gardens on base, because staring at something alive helped them remember they were still human. I never forgot that. So I built Whitmore Healing Gardens for veterans first. No luxury branding. No influencer nonsense. Just quiet places where damaged people could breathe. The first workshop had 6 attendees. 3 Marines, 1 Army medic, a retired firefighter, and a Navy corpsman who barely spoke the entire afternoon. At the end of the session, he stood near the lavender rows staring into the wind. Finally, he said quietly, "This place feels safe." That mattered more to me than money. But money still mattered. For almost 18 months, I barely survived financially. I sold homemade lavender oils at local markets, dried herbs, tea bundles, handmade soaps I learned to produce from YouTube tutorials at 2 in the morning. Sometimes I made $40 in a day. Sometimes less. Meanwhile, Madison's Instagram kept growing. Every few weeks, my mother reposted photos of rooftop parties, designer bags, Malibu brunches, and luxury brand launches. No one in my family ever asked about the garden. Not once. The closest thing came in February 2022 when my mother texted, "Still alive out there?" I stared at the message for almost a full minute before replying. "Yes." She hearted the response. That was the entire conversation. Then came June 18th, 2023. The day everything changed. The heat that evening had finally broken after sunset. Lavender rolled across the western fields in soft purple waves beneath golden light. Wind moved through the rows slowly enough to make the entire property look alive. I pulled out my phone and filmed 30 seconds of it. Nothing fancy. No music. No filters. Just evening light moving across surviving things. I posted it online with one sentence. Some broken places just need someone who refuses to abandon them. Then I went back to repairing irrigation valves. By midnight, the video had over 2 million views. By morning, it had crossed 9 million. And suddenly, the useless daughter everybody forgot about wasn't invisible anymore. By the third day after the video went viral, my phone had become almost unusable. Messages flooded in faster than I could read them. Veterans asking if they could visit the gardens, women telling me they cried watching the sunset over the lavender fields, journalists requesting interviews, wellness brands wanting partnerships, investors wanting meetings. And buried somewhere between all of that chaos were the messages from my family. The first came from Madison at 7:14 a.m. OMG, is this your place? 3 question marks. Like she suddenly remembered I existed because millions of strangers did too. I didn't answer. An hour later, my mother texted, "Your father saw the video on Facebook. Call us when you have a moment." Not "we miss you." Not "we're proud of you." Just logistics. I muted the conversation and went outside instead. The gardens looked different now that the world had seen them. Not physically. The lavender still moved softly in the morning wind. Bees still drifted lazily between rows. The fountain still had a crack running through the center from years before I arrived. But suddenly the place carried attention. Fame has weight to it. You can feel it pressing against your life. 3 local news vans showed up that week. Then a Sacramento lifestyle magazine. Then a veterans mental health nonprofit from San Diego asked if they could host retreat weekends there. Within a month, Whitmore Healing Gardens was booked solid through October. I hired my first employee on July 12, 2023. His name was Luis Mendoza, former Army mechanic, 42 years old, divorced, quiet. During the interview, he walked through the lavender field, slowly, hands in his pockets. Finally, he said, "This place doesn't feel commercial." "It isn't," I replied. "That's why it works." I hired him on the spot. 2 weeks later, I hired a second employee. Then a third. By September, I had 6 people working the property full-time. For the first time since leaving active duty, I stopped feeling like survival was temporary. And that terrified me more than struggle ever had. Because once you finally build something valuable, you start realizing how much there is to lose. The business grew faster than I could process it. Retreat bookings doubled every month. Wellness podcasts featured the gardens. Veterans organizations partnered with us. Local wineries asked about collaborations. One luxury botanical company offered $180,000 annually just to source our lavender oils exclusively. The craziest part. People kept calling me inspiring. That word always felt strange in my mouth. I didn't feel inspiring. I felt tired. I felt disciplined. I felt like someone who had simply refused to die quietly. In November, Eleanor sat beside me on the porch after a 12-hour workday while workers installed new pathway lighting across the eastern gardens. "You know what your problem is?" she asked. "I have several. You still think this place surviving was an accident?" I looked out across the property. The gardens stretched beautifully beneath the evening lights now. Lavender fields, herb terraces, meditation paths, restored greenhouse glowing amber from inside, wind chimes moving gently near the veterans' reflection garden we built that fall. 3 years earlier, it had looked like a graveyard. Now it looked alive. "I think I just worked harder than everybody expected," I said. Eleanor smiled faintly. "Exactly." The first acquisition offer arrived in January 2024. A wellness hospitality company based in Arizona emailed requesting a private meeting. I almost deleted it. Then a second company reached out. Then a third. By February, I realized something important. Whitmore Healing Gardens had become more than property. It had become a brand. And brands make people greedy. That's when Rebecca Hayes entered my life. 45, corporate attorney, razor-sharp mind, former Air Force JAG officer. She wore charcoal suits and spoke with the kind of calm confidence that made people nervous. We met at a restaurant in Sacramento. She reviewed my numbers for almost 20 minutes before finally looking up. "You built all this yourself?" "Yes." "No investors?" "No." "No inheritance funding?" I almost laughed at that. "Definitely not." Rebecca closed the folder slowly. "Claire, you're not sitting on a small business anymore." "What am I sitting on?" She leaned back in her chair. "A highly scalable emotional experience." I stared at her. "That sounds fake." "It's not. People pay enormous money to feel peace now because almost nobody has it anymore." She tapped the paperwork again. "Your veterans programs alone give this brand legitimacy corporations can't manufacture." The largest offer came 2 weeks later. Aurelia Wellness Group. Luxury retreat company expanding nationally. They wanted the property. The brand. Expansion rights. Partnership ownership. Initial offer $4.1 million. I remember sitting alone in my office after reading the number 6 separate times. 4.1 million. 3 years earlier, my mother called me the useless child. Now corporations were bidding on the thing they thought would bury me. Rebecca negotiated aggressively. Never accept the first number, she told me. They're buying your story as much as the land. Final offer after negotiations, $4.7 million. Plus operational control. Plus executive salary. Plus national expansion rights under my leadership. When Rebecca called with the final number, I sat silently for almost 30 seconds. You still there? She asked. Yes. You okay? I looked through the office windows toward the lavender fields moving softly beneath sunset light. No, I said honestly, I think I'm in shock. The contracts came with a strict NDA until signing day. No public discussion. No announcements. No disclosures. That part ended up mattering more than anyone realized. Especially my family. Because while my business exploded upward, Madison's life started collapsing behind the scenes. I didn't know most of it at first. Social media hid things well. Online, she still looked perfect. Designer outfits, Hollywood parties, smiling selfies from rooftop restaurants in West Hollywood. But cracks eventually show in people who build their lives around appearances. In March, my mother accidentally called me instead of Madison. I answered while reviewing supplier invoices in my office. Madison, your father cannot keep wiring you money every month, my mother snapped immediately. Silence. Then she realized. Claire. I leaned back slowly in my chair. What's going on? Nothing. That's what she said first. Nothing. The universal family lie. But over the next few weeks, small details started surfacing. Missed mortgage payments. Credit card debt. A failed skincare brand partnership. Expensive parties financed by loans. A boyfriend with a cocaine problem. Then came April 22, 2024. The moment I realized they were coming for my property. I'd driven to Newport Beach for my father's birthday dinner after nearly 8 months without seeing them in person. The house looked exactly the same. Ocean view. White stone floors. Perfect lighting. Madison hugged me too enthusiastically when I arrived. That was the first warning sign. The second came during dinner when my father suddenly started asking detailed questions about the gardens. Revenue. Visitor numbers. Partnerships. Expansion. My mother barely touched her wine. Madison stayed unusually quiet. Something felt wrong immediately. Then around 9:40 p.m., I walked toward the kitchen for water and overheard my parents talking inside the study. My mother's voice was sharp with panic. We may have to take Claire's property back. I froze. Then my father answered quietly. Madison can't survive losing everything. And suddenly, I understood exactly what was about to happen. For 3 days after that dinner in Newport Beach, I barely slept. Not because I was surprised. That's the strange thing about family betrayal. Deep down, most people see it coming long before it arrives. They just spend years hoping they're wrong. I knew my parents. I knew the way my father protected Madison from consequences like he could negotiate reality itself. I knew my mother believed love meant rescuing the child who demanded the most attention, and I knew neither of them truly understood what Whitmore Healing Gardens had become. To them it was still dirt. Expensive dirt now, maybe. But still something temporary. Something movable. Something they believed I would surrender if they pressured me hard enough. They had no idea I'd already signed the preliminary acquisition agreement with Aurelia Wellness Group 2 weeks earlier. The NDA protected the deal. And for the first time in my life, silence gave me power instead of pain. Rebecca called me Thursday afternoon while I was supervising new pathway construction near the meditation garden. You sound exhausted, she said immediately. I am. You want to tell me why? I watched workers unloading stone tiles from a truck while lavender moved gently beneath the afternoon heat. My family's about to try taking the property. Silence. Then Rebecca sighed softly like she already understood the entire story. How bad? They think my sister deserves it more. That sentence tells me everything I need to know. I leaned against the fence slowly. Can we move the signing ceremony earlier? It's already scheduled for May 18th. I know, but I want it public. Rebecca paused. How public? Very. That made her laugh once under her breath. Claire Whitmore, are you planning revenge? I thought about that carefully. The younger version of me probably was. But not anymore. No, I said finally, I'm planning closure. The next 10 days became a blur of preparation. Aurelia loved the publicity angle immediately. Their marketing team arranged press coverage, local officials, veteran nonprofit representatives, wellness media, and investors to attend the signing ceremony on the property itself. Meanwhile, I said absolutely nothing to my family. And that silence started eating at them. Madison called first. "Hey, stranger," she said brightly. I stood inside the greenhouse trimming lavender stems while she talked. "Hey. So, Mom says business is going crazy out there." "It's busy." "That's amazing. Pause. You should really come visit LA sometime." I almost smiled hearing that. For 3 years she barely contacted me. Now suddenly we were sisters again. When things slow down, I replied, "They probably won't." Another pause. Then she lowered her voice slightly. "Claire, hypothetically, if someone in the family needed help financially." There it was. Finally. I cut another stem slowly. "What kind of help?" "Oh, nothing crazy," she said too quickly. "Just temporary support, maybe." I stared out through the greenhouse glass toward the gardens. "Madison, you spent years pretending this place didn't exist." "That's not fair." "Number?" She exhaled sharply. "You always make things uncomfortable." Interesting thing to say to the sibling who spent years rebuilding their own life alone. We ended the call 3 minutes later. The next visit came Sunday morning. My parents arrived unannounced. Black Mercedes sedan, my father driving, mother wearing oversized sunglasses even though the sky was cloudy. I met them near the fountain. The same fountain they once considered worthless. Now it sat surrounded by blooming lavender and polished stone pathways. My mother looked around carefully. Not admiring it. Assessing it. My father kept his hands in his pockets the entire time. Finally he said, "You've done well here." 3 years. That was the first compliment. I nodded once, thank you. Then my mother got straight to it. "Madison is in trouble." No build-up. No apology. No pretending. Just straight to the extraction point. "What kind of trouble?" My father looked away toward the gardens. "She's overextended financially." Overextended. Such a wealthy person way to describe disaster. My mother stepped closer. "The condo's nearly underwater. There are lawsuits involving her business. Creditors are circling. And..." She crossed her arms. "And family helps family." There it was again. The family card. Always pulled out by the people who ignored you until they needed something. I stayed quiet. My father finally spoke again. "We've been discussing options." Options. Like they were discussing a damaged asset. "You have 24 hours to vacate the property," my mother said calmly. "Madison will assume ownership tomorrow afternoon." The words hung in the air so casually they almost sounded unreal. I looked at her for several seconds. "You're serious?" "Very." I glanced at my father. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. That hurt worse than my mother's cruelty ever did. Because part of me, some stupid surviving little piece, still wanted him to choose me just once. "On what legal grounds?" I asked quietly. My father finally answered. "The property originally came from family holdings. We can challenge portions of the transfer." Rebecca later told me that argument probably wouldn't have survived 10 minutes in court. But they weren't expecting a legal fight. They were expecting guilt. My mother stepped closer again. "You're good at surviving, Claire." I stared at her. "Excuse me." "You always have been." "Madison isn't." Her voice softened slightly. "She deserves this more than you do." That sentence should have destroyed me. 3 years earlier, it probably would have. But standing there in the middle of gardens I'd rebuilt with my own hands, something unexpected happened instead. I stopped needing their approval. Completely. Like a final wire snapping loose inside my chest. I looked around slowly. The lavender fields. The restored greenhouse. The meditation paths. The veteran's reflection wall. Everything they once mocked. Everything they never bothered asking about. I built all of it without them. Maybe that was the real reason they couldn't understand it. My mother mistook my silence for surrender. "You have until tomorrow at noon," she repeated. "Madison will move in afterward." Then she turned and walked back toward the car. My father lingered behind for half a second. His eyes finally met mine. And for the first time in years, he looked uncertain. Not guilty yet. Just uncertain. Like he suddenly realized he no longer understood the daughter standing in front of him. Then he left too. The black Mercedes disappeared down the gravel road while wind moved softly through the lavender behind me. I stood there another minute before pulling out my phone. Rebecca answered immediately. "Well?" she asked. "They gave me 24 hours. Silence. Then Jesus Christ. I laughed softly for the first time all week. Not because it was funny. Because it was finally clear. No, I said quietly. Actually, I think this might end up perfect. That afternoon, Aurelia's event team arrived to finalize ceremony preparations. White tents, floral arrangements, security, catering, press signage, luxury transport schedules. The property transformed into something almost surreal overnight. By evening, workers were installing the massive entrance banner beside the front gate. Whitmore, Healing Gardens Partnership Announcement, Aurelia Wellness Group. I stood watching them secure it beneath the setting sun. Luis walked up beside me holding 2 bottles of water. You okay? He asked. I took one slowly. My family thinks they're coming tomorrow to take this place away from me. He stared at me. You serious? Very. Luis looked back toward the giant sign. Then toward the luxury event setup. Then back at me. A slow grin spread across his face. Oh, he said softly, this is gonna be ugly. That night I barely slept. Not from fear anymore. From anticipation. Around midnight I walked alone through the lavender fields beneath cool California moonlight. The property smelled like earth and summer wind and blooming herbs. Peaceful. Alive. Mine. For years I thought proving my family wrong would heal something inside me. But standing there beneath the stars, I finally understood the truth. The healing had already happened long before success arrived. The money wasn't the victory. The garden was... The next morning at 11:42 a.m., Madison's white Range Rover rolled through the gates carrying empty moving boxes in the back. Then she saw the cameras, and everything began to fall apart. Madison slammed the Range Rover door so hard the sound echoed across the gardens. What the hell is this? She shouted. Behind her, my mother stepped out of the Mercedes looking pale beneath her sunglasses. My father followed slower, staring at the rows of parked luxury SUVs lining the gravel driveway. Reporters moved near the ceremony tent adjusting cameras and microphones. Caterers carried trays beneath white linen canopies. Aurelia executives stood near the fountain speaking with local officials and veterans organization directors. And hanging above the entrance, impossible to miss, was the giant banner announcing the partnership. Madison looked at me like she'd walked into the wrong reality. You sold it, she whispered. I stood calmly beside the fountain in a navy pantsuit Rebecca had practically forced me to buy for the ceremony. I partnered it, I corrected. My mother took 2 quick steps toward me. Claire, what is going on? Before I could answer, one of the reporters approached, holding a microphone. Captain Whitmore, she asked. We're ready whenever you are. Madison turned sharply toward the woman. Captain. The reporter blinked, yes? My sister stared back at me slowly like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in her life. Not as the quiet older sister. Not as the family disappointment. Not as the invisible daughter they abandoned out here. But as someone important. Someone people respected. And Madison absolutely hated it. You knew about this, she demanded. Yes. And you didn't tell us. I almost laughed. For 3 years they never once asked what I was building. Now suddenly they wanted transparency. Rebecca appeared beside me, then sharp charcoal suit tablet in hand. Claire, she said calmly, Aurelia's board is ready to begin in 5 minutes. My mother turned toward her immediately. Who are you? Rebecca Hayes, Ms. Whitmore's attorney. Attorney. That word landed hard. Because people like my parents only hire attorneys when something becomes valuable. My father finally spoke. How much is this deal worth? Rebecca glanced at me first. I nodded once. 4.7 million, she answered. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the wind seemed to stop for a second. Madison's mouth opened slightly. My mother's face lost color. And my father? My father looked like someone had punched all the air out of his chest. 4.7 million? The dead garden. The useless daughter. The worthless land. All of it suddenly transformed into numbers large enough for them to respect. That realization hurt more than I expected. Not because they wanted the money. Because they finally saw value in me only after strangers did first. The ceremony began at noon exactly. Nearly 80 people sat beneath the white tent facing the stage setup near the fountain. Veterans from across California attended. Local officials, wellness executives, journalists, former retreat guests, employees. Luis stood near the back wearing his best suit. Eleanor sat front row beside Rebecca. When she saw me looking at her, she smiled proudly and mouthed, Told you. I stepped onto the stage while cameras flashed. The applause startled me a little. I'd spent most of my life avoiding attention. Military intelligence teaches you to disappear into rooms quietly. Recognition was usually dangerous where I came from. But standing there in front of those gardens, I realized something important. This wasn't attention. It was acknowledgement. Aurelia's CEO spoke first, then the county veterans director, then Rebecca walked to the microphone. 3 years ago, she said Captain Claire Whitmore inherited 40 acres of abandoned property most people considered unusable. I glanced toward my family standing near the back. None of them moved. Today, Rebecca continued, Whitmore Healing Gardens has become one of the most respected veterans' wellness retreats on the West Coast. Applause rolled through the crowd. Captain Whitmore accomplished this without investors, without inheritance funding, and without corporate backing. She built it through disciplined leadership and extraordinary resilience. Discipline. Leadership. Resilience. Funny how differently the world described me compared to my family. Then Rebecca said the sentence that changed everything. Aurelia Wellness Group is proud to finalize a $4.7 million national partnership under Captain Whitmore's continued executive leadership. The crowd erupted. Camera flashes exploded across the stage. And somewhere near the back, Madison started crying. Not soft crying. Angry crying. The kind that comes from watching someone you underestimated become unreachable. I signed the contracts at 12:24 p.m. Aurelia's CEO signed immediately after. Rebecca leaned over quietly afterward. How do you feel? I looked out across the gardens. The fountain water moving softly. The lavender swaying beneath sunlight. Veterans smiling near the pathways we built together. Employees laughing near the catering tables. Safe. That place finally felt safe. Free, I answered. The private confrontation happened about an hour later. My family waited near the greenhouse after most guests drifted toward lunch and networking conversations. Madison's makeup had started running beneath her sunglasses. My mother looked furious. My father looked exhausted. I walked toward them slowly. No anger anymore. Just distance. Madison spoke first. You planned this. Yes. You humiliated us on purpose. I stared at her calmly. You arrived with moving boxes. That shut her up. My mother crossed her arms tightly. Family doesn't do this to each other. I almost smiled at that. Family also doesn't call one daughter useless while handing the other $1 million condo. Her face hardened immediately. That was years ago. Yes, I said quietly, and I remember every word. Silence settled between us. Finally, my father stepped forward. For the first time in years, he looked old. Not powerful. Not commanding. Just tired. I was wrong about you, he said. Simple sentence. But hearing it from him felt strangely painful. Because part of me had waited years for those words. And another part no longer needed them. You thought I'd fail here, I replied. Yes. I nodded slowly. I know. He looked around the greenhouse then. The restored glass panels, hanging herbs, sunlight spilling across stone floors, life everywhere. I didn't understand you, he admitted quietly. That one almost broke me. Not because it fixed anything. Because it was true. My entire life they kept trying to measure me using Madison's definition of success. Charm. Luxury. Status. Visibility. But survival had shaped me differently. The military had shaped me differently. Pain had shaped me differently. You didn't even try, I said softly. My mother's eyes filled suddenly. Claire. No. I looked at all three of them. I spent years thinking something was wrong with me because my own family treated me like a burden. My voice stayed calm, but my chest felt tight. Then I came here and built something people actually healed inside. Nobody spoke. Wind moved softly through the lavender outside the greenhouse windows. Finally, Madison whispered bitterly, So what now? You just leave us with nothing. Interesting. Not congratulations. Not pride. Still money. Still extraction. I looked at my sister for a long moment. Then I answered honestly, No, I leave you with consequences. That landed hardest of all. My father closed his eyes briefly. My mother started crying quietly. And for the first time in my life, I walked away from all of them without feeling guilty. 6 months later, Whitmore Healing Gardens expanded into 3 retreat locations across California. We employed 27 veterans full-time. The Foundation Scholarship Program funded therapy retreats for soldiers struggling with PTSD. And every evening when the sun dropped low across the lavender fields, people still stopped walking just to stand quietly in the wind and breathe. Sometimes healing looks dramatic. But most of the time, it looks like surviving long enough to become someone your pain can no longer control. If this story touched you in any way, I'd love to hear where you're watching from and what part stayed with you most. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the people who underestimate us the most are the ones who never took the time to truly see us. And if you enjoy emotional stories about resilience, family, and second chances, make sure you subscribe and stay with us for more journeys like this.